Episode 7 of the State of the Old Republic podcast was originally recorded on October 3rd, 2016. It's the State of the Old Republic podcast. This week, BioWare gives us a teaser from the upcoming Knights of the Eternal Throne cinematic. Just who is the mysterious figure that we see? Also this week, more music from the game is released. This time it's 5 tracks from Knights of the Fallen Empire. The long-awaited Cantina tour arrives this Friday. What can we expect from the big event? And finally, this episode, I take a look back at Knights of the Fallen Empire. And with that, it's time to make the jump to Lightspeed and check out the State of the Old Republic. Well, welcome to episode 7 of the State of the Old Republic podcast. I'm your host, Ted, and as you heard from the opening, I have another great show lined up for you today. I don't have any announcements this week, so let's dive right in and slice the HoloNet and review the news this week. Well, perhaps the biggest news coming out of BioWare this week was they released a Knights of the Eternal Throne teaser, a little bit of a teaser from their upcoming cinematic. Now, the full cinematic will be revealed on October the 7th, but they tweeted this out with the caption that read, "A dangerous Star Wars family grows stronger." Now, in the video, and it was a very short video clip, just a few seconds, but what you saw was a child sitting in the middle of a circle, surrounded by some folks, and looked to be using the Force. And it was very dark, kind of creepy. This was not like a happy setting. It was very ominous. And there's been a lot of speculation about just who this person is. And some people think it's Vitiate, just devouring his first world. Other people have suggested that maybe Valkorion has a 4th child, and this is just this is the 4th child, or it could be a young Valkorion himself. Now, as far as my thoughts, I think it's a young Valkorion, and of course you might want to ask, well, what's the difference between that and Vitiate? And that's a great question, and I don't really have the answer to it, other than I think they're done with Vitiate. I really think that they like Valkorion, they like Archon, they like Valen, as the caption in the tweet said, a dangerous Star Wars family grows stronger, and they're really trying to build a story and build their world now around this particular family, Valkorion and his children. And I theorized in an earlier podcast that our character is actually part of this family, like we are Valkorion's progeny, and that's ultimately where this story is headed. And I still believe that. And that's one of the things I'm looking forward to with actually playing the Knights of the Eternal Throne, is to see if that plays out. But that's my belief. So I think they want the focus to be on Valkorion, and even though Valkorion and Vitiate are the same person, they're certainly very different characters and seemingly different personalities. And I guess Valkorion is sort of an improvement over Vitiate, some sort of evolution. I don't really know, right? No one knows at this point. But I think they'd like to focus more on Valkorion than, say, Vitiate. And I think during his time as the Sith Emperor, he was able to sort of go back and forth and kind of simultaneously run Zakul and be Valkorion, and at the same time he was Vitiate. Again, none of this is really clear, but I'm going to go out on a limb here and say I think it's Valkorion. So my top 3 of those 3 theories, my top choice, number 1, I think it's Valkorion. Number 2, maybe a 4th child. And finally, I would be willing to say that it's Vitiate. So I'm probably wrong. It probably is Vitiate devouring his first world, but I'm gonna hang my hat on Valkorion. But anyway, the full cinematic will be revealed on October the 7th, which is the date of the long-awaited Cantina tour. So let's talk about that for just a moment. And what can we expect from the Cantina tour? Well, I guess the best way to look at it is to think about what they've done in past Cantina tours, or even looking back to the Knights of the Fallen Empire expansion announcement. I think it's just going to be like that. Obviously, we're going to get the cinematic. We're hopefully going to get a release date. We'll get some logistical stuff, right? What is the pricing? Is it going to be, are we just going to pay for the expansion, or is it going to be subscription based, much like Knights of the Fallen Empire? I think it's probably not going to be subscription based. I'm guessing it's going to be a sort of a one-time fee, but it's going to be delivered in the same fashion that Knights of the Fallen Empire was, meaning we'll probably get a bunch of chapters on release, then there'll be a little bit of a break, and then we'll get a chapter a month until we reach the end, and then hopefully that'll lead us right into whatever the next expansion will be. So that's what I'm expecting. We'll probably hear a bit changes to the level cap. Maybe they'll announce details on specific class changes, which have been data mined all over the place now. I would anticipate mention of whatever they're going to do for crew skills. They'll probably tell us, oh, we're going to get more companions and so forth. Regardless of all that, and of course they're going to probably talk about the story, and I wouldn't be surprised if we got a snippet from one of the early chapters. They do like to reveal some of that type of stuff to get us interested, so I'd expect a little bit of a reveal, in addition to the cinematic, to something from one of the early chapters, some actual gameplay footage. Regardless of all that, though, I think all eyes are going to be focused on the end game and what are the plans for group content. I really think they should just lead off with that. They're not going to lead off with that, but I think that's the information that really makes or breaks this announcement, maybe even makes or breaks this expansion. I mean, I don't want to get all gloomy here and apocalyptic, but I just think I think it's important. I mean, as someone who's played a lot of MMOs, I mean, you spend whatever content they give you, you spend the majority of your gameplay time at max level in a position where you're going to do end game stuff. So if they don't have new flashpoints, if they don't have a new operation or two, being optimistic here, then I don't know. I think the expansion announcement is going to be a bit of a disappointment. And I think that's all you'll hear about, and people are going to talk about that, and whatever else that's going to be really, really good will get overshadowed by sort of the negative thoughts surrounding a lack of group content. I'm not saying there won't be any group content, but I just think that is the make or break bit of news that'll come out of this Cantina tour. So I can't wait. October 7th, just a few more days, and there we'll know. And I'll cover that in my next podcast, which hopefully will be right around the 11th of October. So also this week, as part of their 5th year anniversary celebration, some brand new music was released. So you could head over to SOTOR's YouTube channel and have a listen. But there were 5 tracks from Knights of the Fallen Empire. All music that if you play the story over and over and over again, you're going to be very familiar with. But it's still fun. I still like the fact that they're releasing this music. The 5 tracks are A War of Errors, Entering Asylum, Arkin, The Inner Flame, The General and the Endless Swamp, and Valen the Right Hand. Again, all of this is music that you've heard while playing Knights of the Fallen Empire, and it's now available on their YouTube channel for your listening pleasure. And speaking of Knights of the Fallen Empire, I wanted to spend the rest of this podcast now, while I'm waiting to get good information about Knights of the Eternal Throne, just taking a look back at the expansion, talking about some of the features that were introduced, and going over some of the things I liked, some of the things I didn't like, thinking about what worked and maybe what didn't work. And I was planning to do this. I thought maybe this is something I would do over a series of podcasts, but I've sort of fallen behind and wanted to cover other things. So I'm going to try and go through as much of this as I can today. Of course, the name of the expansion was Knights of the Fallen Empire, but thinking back on it, I think an alternate title that would have worked for this expansion would be the Subscription Gambit. Because everything that they did, the core changes and everything about this game and what they tried to do was predicated on trying to get people to subscribe to the game. And that's what it was all about. It was just trying to bring in that revenue. And if you wanted to play the expansion, if you wanted to have access to the story, you had to subscribe to the game. Now, they designed it in a way that you could have waited until the end, till just past August and after the release of Chapter 16, and you could have just subscribed for that 1 month, and you'd have gotten the whole thing. You'd have had to wait a year to do it, but that would have been a cheap way to do it. But that's how they did it, and I think by all accounts they succeeded in their goal. I'm a fan of SOTOR Economics, if you've seen that site, and Andrew over there. Back in June, he kind of did an analysis of an earnings call about EA/BioWare. And here's a little bit about what he had to say about that. And I'm quoting Andrew. He said, the game is doing well enough to appear as the second name attribution for the category's revenue for the fiscal year. This indicated a continued strong position within the category, which has value in terms of the game remaining a large contributor for EA and remaining a development priority moving forward. In other words, it seems like they made money this year, that their plan to get subscriptions actually was successful, and people did subscribe, and the game, whatever financial goals they set out for themselves, sounds like they may have actually met them. Andrew also went on to write, though, the chasm between the financial success of the game and the state of the once vibrant MMO player base of the game has never been wider. By all discernible metrics, the amount of players and the total amount of playtime in the game appears to have decreased significantly in the past 6 to 12 months. Remember, he's writing this in June. The game has been altered to its core and now resembles a TV series nearly as much as an MMO in many ways. As an analyst, there is no longer any doubt that the most profitable path has been selected. So in other words, they modeled this around gaining subscriptions. It sounds like it worked. However, when you talk to players and ask them, are you really having fun or what are you doing in game? It just seems like there is a lot of dissatisfaction out there. And again, you can point directly to, well, until they released a new Battleground, and I don't really PvP much, so I don't know how well that went over, but there was no new PvP that came. But there's no new flashpoints and no new operations and nothing to really do as group content. Yes, and we'll talk about it. So let's jump right into operations and flashpoints, right? So what did they do? Well, they made it such that all of the existing content, Explosive Conflict, Eternity Vault, Terror from Beyond, all of the existing operations were now at a difficulty level. They were tuned towards level 65, right? They were endgame content. They had all their gear upgraded such that you would go in there and get your set bonuses and all this other stuff. And that was what you were meant to do with your guildmates and with your friends, and that was to run the old content. But the problem with it is it was old, right? I mean, the newest operations were released in 2014, I believe, with Shadow of Revan. So they were old. Eternity Vault obviously was almost 5 years. It was, the first operation introduced into the game. That's talking about nearly 5-year-old content. So, and it's stuff that players have run over and over and over again. And I like this as a concept, right? On paper, I thought this was a good idea. I thought it was kind of neat. Hey, they're making this stuff relevant, and you're a new player to the game. You can actually go run Eternity Vault and get some gear out of it, and it seemed like a fun thing to do. But it got old very, very fast, and even I went with my guildmates, and we ran Eternity Vault and Karaga's Palace, and yeah, the first couple of times that we ran through there, it was kind of neat. It was a little bit nostalgic. It was kind of fun to go back and do that, but it got old very, very thin. And I think with operations and really just raids in general, there's a very limited shelf life. And I mean, when you release a new one, it's probably only good for 4, 5, 6 months at the outset. After 6 months, it just gets old. You've beaten it. You're sick to death of it. So recycling it and making it new again only goes so far. And I think it even has it just shortens the shelf life. Now, people go in there because it's all there is to do, but they're not necessarily happy about it. So I think this was a big problem with Knights of the Fallen Empire, and really the source of just about all the negative criticism levied at it, because I thought the story was pretty good. And the story was everything, right? That's where a lot of the emphasis was. That was to draw people in. It was a bit of a longer story than what we'd seen in the past, and the way they broke it out, as Andrew pointed out, resembles a TV series. I like that. I liked getting the content broken up like that and getting something new each month, having a reason to go back and log in each month and see some new content and getting a new patch like that. I like that. I like that delivery. Not everybody did, I guess, but I enjoyed that. And so if they do that again for Knights of the Eternal Throne, I'll be happy. I don't know about anybody else, but I enjoyed that. It really actually kept me engaged a lot longer in the game than I probably would have been otherwise. If they had just given us all the story at once, or given us the first 9 chapters, and then waited till after January, and then given us the remaining chapters in one patch, I probably would not have spent as much time playing the game this past year as I did. So I think that was a good delivery mechanism. Other changes that they did. I think the big thing here with Knights of the Fallen Empire was this. As miserable as the group content was, mainly because there was no significant new content for groups, the game, however, was extremely solo friendly. And if you were someone that liked to go in there and just play, experience some story, and do some things on your own, maybe you only had an hour to kill or a couple of hours and just wanted to go muck around, the game was very solo friendly. It was very easy to level. They introduced a lot of solo modes for the various flashpoints, so you could go and run those on your own. The Star Fortresses, which were new, were basically designed to have a solo mode and then a slightly harder solo mode, which was labeled as +2. Even the Eternal Championship, which was introduced last spring, was intended mainly for you to go and do it by yourself. So there was a lot of content there that was designed around a single individual going and playing them, whether it was the story, right? The story was not group content. It was about you and your character, and you were the central figure. Leveling, I mean, you typically did that on your own, and they streamlined the whole leveling process, which I thought was very good, right? And they had new indicators to show you which were sort of like the core quests. Here's your class story. Here's your planetary quest, and these were like the main stories. They had a mechanism for you to hide what they would refer to as these exploration quests. These were just the side quests. They weren't anything new, but you could just sort of hide them and not even be tempted or bothered by them, and just take the, just if you wanted to go from point A to point B, you could do that. You could actually go and level up through some of these flashpoints. And then they introduced this whole planetary level sync, which a lot of people didn't like. I thought from a leveling perspective, it was great. Maybe not so much from a max level perspective, right? Because you go and you get really good gear, and then you go out into the world, and then you're nerfed. But really, the other thing they did was like those weekly heroics. They took all the planetary heroic requests, and they said, all right, you can now go ahead and do these once a week, and you could do them at various levels, which I thought were nice. So again, as you were leveling up, if you needed gear, at least prior to the Dark versus Light event, you could go ahead and run some of these heroics and get some pretty decent gear. You get some prototype quality gear that was actually pretty good and very, good enough to keep your character strong and going smoothly through the leveling process. So, as I said, the game became very solo friendly, which is nothing wrong with that, right? Except that it's an MMO and people look at, massive and multiplayer. And again, I just think what it comes down to, and the bottom line here is, had they had group content, flashpoints, and operations in addition to all this other stuff, this would have been a huge hit. This expansion would have been a huge hit, but all the negativity, I think, just boils down to lack of flashpoints, lack of operations, lack of group content. So enough. I'm not going to beat that bantha anymore today. So, which is to say, I'm probably going to go say some other nice things about the expansion, and really that and companion influence is probably the only other thing that I probably have some bad things to say about. So let's talk about companions and companions influence. Again, companion changes. I love the companion changes. Well, remember what they did? They made it so that every companion could play any role. So that means you could just pull out a companion. You could give him a DPS role if you wanted. You could give him the healing role if you wanted. You could give him the tanking role. And, you could just swap these around anytime you want. You could take a companion and put him into any kind of role that you felt was good. And I used them all. There was times when I did DPS. There was times when I put him in tanking roles and times when I put him in healing roles. And I thought all of that was great. Companions no longer needed gear. They no longer benefited from the stats on gear. Gear was cosmetic only, which meant you could just sort of dress up your companions and have them look as good or as bad as you want. You could make them look really cool, or you could take someone like a Quinn, who hadn't yet returned to the game, and you could just make them look like a complete clown, and yet they would be effective in combat for you. Whatever. There's a lot of flexibility there. The only thing that would have made that better is if they had extended the outfit designer towards the companion. So I thought that was good. The one thing I didn't like about it was they did change some of the weapon that companions used, and I didn't like that. Like Eric Jordan used to use a hand cannon, and now I think he's using rifles or something like that. Did not like that change necessarily, but overall, that change to the companions was really, really good. And the whole idea, right, was they wanted it so that you could bring out any companion that you wanted, right? Hey, you have a favorite companion, you can bring out this companion, anytime, and run with them, and just kind of base it off of your preferences and your favorite and whatever you felt like doing at any given time. And I think that worked. They hit the mark there until they introduced this whole notion of companion influence, and this just kind of blew the whole thing to hell. All right, companion influence was something that you had to level up, and it started at whatever 1 or 0, and you got it all the way up to 50, and it is a horrendous grind. It is a credit sink, it is a time sink. It's not fun, it's not engaging, it's boring, it's tedious. It just makes you want to pull your hair out, and as a result, I think between my 20 plus characters, I have exactly one and only one character whose influence level is 50. And a few that might be touching the 40s, and a bunch in the 30s, and many of them are at least maybe 20, 25. But one and only one that has an influence level 50. And do you need all your companions to be at influence level 50? No. Do you need a companion with that influence level to do most things? No, but I think you should have at least one on every character. And here's the thing about players of MMOs and their mentality. Whatever it is they're doing, there's like this unwritten rule that you have to find the fastest, most efficient way and find like the best tool to get the job done. So, do you need a companion with influence level 50 to go farm crystals and biomats in the endless swamp? No, you don't. But it helps, right? But you do it anyway because, well, that's the best one you have available. So why wouldn't you? So for the most part, if you were doing things like that, if you were leveling up, you probably weren't going to have a level 50 companion anyway. But you certainly didn't need that for leveling. The weekly heroic quests, really, you could get by with a companion that was probably, influence level 25, which wasn't that hard to get. So there was a lot of things in the game where you didn't need it. Where it did help, though, were things like the Eternal Championship or those star fortresses, the +2 star fortresses. Having a companion with influence level 50 was really good there. Tactical flashpoints is another one. You kick someone out of the group or someone has to drop or whatever and you're waiting for the group to be filled. You could bust out a companion, and having one with an influence level 50 really made life a little bit easier. In fact, you could argue that sometimes they were probably better than some of the players you get, but that's a topic for another day, I guess. So there are times where I think having a companion with that high influence level really helped. And, of course, crew skills. That was the other big change they did, right? So instead of having certain companions tied to specific crew skills, they just changed it so that as their influence level went up, the efficiency with which they completed crew skill tasks and the likelihood that they would crit went way up. And so that is certainly an area where having multiple companions with influence level 50 could make a big difference. So what was so bad about this? Well, the problem is it was a really long grind to get to influence level 50. And the way you did it was by handing out companion gifts. And of course, you wanted to make sure you had those legacy perks so you could get the maximum benefit. And you also wanted to make sure you were doing their favorites. So one of the methods of doing it was to go to the fleet, and there was a companion gift vendor on the fleet selling rank 1 and rank 2 gifts. Now, I don't think you could get to rank influence level 50 just on rank 1 gifts alone, but you could get there pretty close. But it was slow, and it was expensive. It was going to cost you a few million credits to do that. And handing out gifts was just the worst thing ever, because you could only give the gifts one at a time, and it had a cast time associated with it, right? So it was like a 3-second cast time. So you click on the gift, and then 3 seconds later, your companion has the gift, and they get like 2 points of influence, and then you keep doing this like, thousands and thousands of times. And all those gifts cost credits, so it was expensive. So that was really the big gripe about it. And BioWare did attempt to address it as the expansion wore on, but they did so by not really fixing it, but rather doubling down on the pain, as far as I'm concerned, right? Because if you remember, you could like pop an alacrity buff, and that would actually speed up the cast time with which, and reduce the amount of time, the cast time for giving the gifts. They nerfed that. So what did they do? Well, they decided, well, let's take advantage of this whole legacy perk system, and they added legacy perks in there where you could pay money, lots of credits. And this is like in the millions of credits as well. So they made this giant credit sink where you could reduce the cast time of the gift giving. And I don't think it got to the point where it was instant, but it was pretty close to that. And here's the thing about these legacy perks. There's kind of two varieties. They're the kind where it applies to every character on your account, and then there's other ones that are per character. They're character specific, and they made this one character specific, which meant that you probably wanted to get it on each and every one of your characters, and depending on how many characters you have, that's millions and millions of credits that you'd be looking to spend just to reduce the cast time. And what I don't understand is why they didn't just either make it instant, right? Or B, better yet, you know what, keep the cast time. You know what, you could make it a 3-second cast. Heck, raise it up to 5 seconds. I don't care. As long as you give me the ability to give them a stack of gifts in one swipe, that would have been awesome, because you have to give so many gifts for each companion. And that would have been nice, right? I have a stack of gifts in my inventory. I right-click on it. I get that little window and says, how many would you like to give? And I just choose a number, click the button, and then fine. You can give me a 5-second cast time, but if for 5 seconds I'm going to give them 1,000 gifts all in one, that works for me. That works for me, and that would have been better. And if we only had like 5 companions per character like we did in the old days, you might have said, all right, this might work. You could probably deal with it, but you don't. I mean, there's like 20 plus companions that you're collecting on any given character, and multiply that times however many characters you have, and that is why at least I only have one companion whose influence level is 50. And that's why I really hope they change this system moving forward. They don't have to get rid of companion influence, but the whole method of giving gifts and the rate at which influence is earned needs to change. And I don't know if you realize it, it's very flat in the beginning. So it doesn't take much to get to like level 25, maybe level 30, and then after that it just steeps way the heck up. It's kind of like, imagine the settlers in America when they were settling the West, and there you are, you're moving along the plains of Kansas. It's slow and it's steady, but you're making progress, and it's very flat, very flat, very flat, and then boom, you leave Kansas, there's Colorado, and boom, the Rocky Mountains, and there's the bulk of your journey right there. Just when you think you're getting closer to the end, there it is, you're getting hit with this giant wall. And that's what the companion influence is. Given how they addressed it with those character perks, I imagine that they'll actually just they'll increase, I should say, the influence level cap from 50 to like 60 in Knights of the Eternal Throne. So that was one of my big negatives with this thing. Just absolutely hate it. And like I said, there are only some instances where having a companion at max level like that would help, but still, it's just one of the big annoyances. But other than that, I did enjoy the Eternal Championship, the Star Fortresses, everything else about it. I thought the Cartel Market packs Had a lot of good items. I mean, again, that's all very subjective, but there are a number of things that I found myself buying off the GTN and spending lots of credits on because I thought they looked cool. So I thought they did a good job with those alliance packs. So trying to think what else. I talked about leveling, those weekly heroics, the planetary level sync, companion changes. I mean, crew skills were changed a little bit. I don't really have too much to say, although I did make decent money with augment kits this time around. I hope that stays as a source of income moving forward. And so there you go. So overall, as I said, thought it was a very good expansion. The story was good. I look forward to continuing it. And really the big knock on this thing, as I said before, and I'll take one more whack at that, Bantha, was the lack of group content. And if they can correct that, moving forward, I think Knights of the Eternal Throne has the chance of being very, very successful and a big hit. Because, Star Wars is a big deal right now. In case anyone from BioWare is listening, you got Rogue One coming out in December, Episode 8. A year later, I mean, everyone is into Star Wars right now. Star Wars has made its way back to the top of the pop culture heap, and people are talking about it. People are enjoying it, and I think that should be helping and feeding this game. But it is an MMO, and people like to do things in a group. And so with that, I'm starting to hear the music, and it can mean only one thing: that you have managed to survive this half hour listening to episode 7 of the State of the Old Republic podcast. And I am your host, Ted, and I do thank you for tuning in. You can find this podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, Google Play, and YouTube, and Buzzsprout. You can listen to the show directly from the show's site, which is currently SOTORpodcast.com. And I do have an RSS feed where you can subscribe to the podcast directly. If you have a question for the show, you can email me at sotorpodcast@gmail.com. You can also tweet your questions to @sotorpodcast, and be sure to follow me on Twitter to get the latest information on the podcast. So tune in next week for episode 8, and remember the Sith code: cake is alive.